Recently, Mark Ward, the textual critic enthusiast, released a video entitled "A KJV Onlyist Finally Answers My Question." So in this video, he went over a little bit of a conversation that he and I had. In this video, he brought up how I said that if the King James got to 50% unintelligible, that I would call for a King James update. And later, this number went down to 25%. Mark Ward, in his video, attempted to show what it would be like to read a 50% unintelligible translation, and then 33%, 25%, and lastly, 10%. He claimed that even at 10%, the King James was effectively 100% unintelligible. In this video, me and my friend Sean will be looking at some of the claims made by Mark Ward and refuting them. So, Sean.
Certainly, Kenyon. It's a pleasure to be with you on this. Now, to start off, I really appreciate Mark for being civil in his tone, and I believe it's important that regarding this issue that we be as civil as possible. Breathing down necks of our opposition saying that they're not saved or they're going to hell is a very cult-like behavior, which unfortunately many pastors and people who hold to the King James only stance have demonstrated and caused our group to have the KJVO cult label, even though it is not remotely a true statement. Now, to get to the subject at hand here regarding unintelligibility, Mark covered certain percentages based on one verse. He covered what it was like when a verse was 50%, 33%, 25%, and then 10% unintelligibility. However, I wanted to go through the reality of the situation. I'd like to first start off by providing an analogy. Now, I'm sure most of you, or pretty much everyone here watching this video, has had to do quizzes in school before. Now, let's say you had 10 questions. Each question is worth 10 points. Hence, in total, 100 points for the quiz. Now, another quiz has 20 points per question with 10 questions in total. Hence, 200 total points for this quiz. Now, in essence, if 30 points were faulty, that would mean 30 out of 100. But if 30 points were faulty in the second scenario, that would mean 30 out of 200. Meaning the first scenario presented a 30% fault rate, but the second scenario would present a 15% fault rate. The point that I'm driving at is that Mark Ward provided an example of only one verse with the changes to present the case for the certain percentages not understandable. But if the same amount of changes were presented over the course of 20 to 30, maybe even 50 verses, some chapters do have that, there would be more understandable words compared to unintelligible words. The proper way of handling the subject of intelligibility would be to cover over the course of several verses a certain percentage of unintelligibility. That would be more fair assessment, and I believe Kenyon could elaborate what he was meaning, especially in that video where he took many comments of what Kenyon was saying. I believe Kenyon can elaborate here in the terms of the percentage of intelligibility.
Sure. So when I commented on the video that Mark, the comments that I had made, and Mark was referring to those, I didn't mean 25% that in every 5 words, there would be one word that was unintelligible. What I meant was out of 100 words, there would be only like 5 that would be semi-unreadable. Maybe you could even call them unintelligible if you wanted to. And so I didn't necessarily mean, because I hadn't done the math, but I was just going off base what I was thinking at the moment and not necessarily thinking about, okay, if I do the math, how many words? But I don't think that the point I made was that literally 1 out of 5 words in the King James would have to be unintelligible before there'd be an update, because that would be an enormous rate of unreadability. I mean, you would practically not be able to read that. And that's exactly what Mark showed. But I don't think that he did the way that he did his math was necessarily correct, because I wasn't necessarily talking about, having 1 out of 5 words is hard to read, but instead that you would have it where out of, say, 100 words, you have maybe 5, 8, 10 words at max that are slightly hard or unintelligible. And so another point that I want to bring up is that modern Bibles themselves are not free from hard or archaic words. Mark Ward says that the King James is unintelligible because of words such as besom, and that's an example that I've heard him use more than once. However, modern Bibles have words that are just as hard, if not harder. And I did bring this up in the comment section whenever me and him were talking, was I talked about specifically the New King James with him, but that there are hard words in modern Bibles too, because that's just the nature of the Bible. There are some things that are hard to be understood. That's part of translation. And so Mark Ward, he likes to bring up two major Texas Receptus translations when it comes to reading contemporary translations. He brings up the Modern English Version and the New King James. So I would like to list out some hard words in both of these translations. And so first, I want to start with the New King James. So in Lamentations 5, verse 3, in the King James, it says fatherless. Okay, that's pretty easy to understand. It's someone that doesn't have a father. Their father died. They're fatherless, right? That makes sense. But if you read what the New King James, it's waifs, WAIFS, waifs. What does that even mean? I had to look it up when I first saw it because I was like, I don't know what this means. But I know what fatherless means. It's very, very easy to understand. Fatherless, without father. Okay. And then again in Acts 27, verse 17, it says in the King James, quicksands, but in the New King James, it says Sardis sands. Now, I've never heard of a Sardis sands, but I have heard of quicksand. And then also, many times in the King James, it uses the word plain as in like a field, a plain. And then in the New King James, it uses terebinth tree. Now, I don't know what a terebinth tree is, but apparently that's supposed to be easier to understand, I guess. And so also in Jonah 2, verse 6, bottoms, referring to the bottoms of the mountains, versus moorings. What is a mooring? I don't know what a mooring is. And then again, we have Acts 13, verse 7, verse 8, verse 12, Acts 18, verse 12, and Acts 19, verse 35. It changes the word deputy or deputies to consul or consuls. Okay. So I know what a deputy is and what deputies are, but I don't know what a proconsul is. I don't know what that is. And there was an example, actually, this is the example I gave Mark in my discussion with him. Isaiah 28, verses 1 and 4. The word fat is changed to verdant. Now, I read this in a book, actually, this book back here, A More Sure Word. I read it in this book. There's a list in the back about hard words that are in modern Bibles, and it brought up verdant. And until I had read that book, I did not understand what verdant mean. I had never heard it. And so, you know what I did? I looked it up and I was like, this is the first time I've heard of it. How many people are going to be reading the King James? And that's the New King James. And that's the first time they're going to have heard that word. But I know what a fat valley is. It's just a bountiful, it's flourishing. That's what it means. It's easy to understand. But yet, verdant is a word nobody I've ever heard use. And yet, somehow, modern Bibles are easier. And here's another one. Daniel 6, verse 2. The word princes, which is the King James, pretty easy to understand. Princes is changed to satraps. How is satrap more understandable than prince? It's not. And so when people claim that, oh, modern Bibles are just so much easier to read, that's actually not true because there are still hard words in modern Bibles. And so next, I want to move on to the MEV. Okay, so in Deuteronomy 28, in the King James, it says astonishment. And in the MEV, it says bewilderment. Now, this is probably not the hardest out of all these ones, but still, it's a harder word because astonishment versus bewilderment. There's a lot less people that use bewilderment or I was bewildered than I was astonished. Okay. In Exodus 35, verse 22, the King James says bracelets, but the MEV says brooches. I've never heard of a brooch. I've not heard of that word until I was looking at the MEV, four hard words, and I found it. And I was like, well, I don't know what that means. In Job 30, verse 12, in the King James, it says youth. In the MEV, it says brood. B-R-O-O-D, brood. In Ezekiel 29, verse 10, it says rob, and then it says robbed. And in the MEV, it says plunder and plundered. Now, I don't know about you, but I think rob is a lot easier to understand than plunder, or robbed is easier to understand than plundered. And then in Matthew 27, verse 27, John 18:3 and 12, and then Acts 10:1, it says band in the King James, as in a band of people, a band of soldiers. And the MEV says detachment. I mean, how does band versus detachment, how does detachment make it easier? It doesn't. In Psalm 13:4 in the King James, it says rejoice. And then in the MEV, it says exult. Like lift up, or like what does that mean? Right? How is rejoice harder than exult? E-X-U-L-T, exult. Like how is rejoice not easier? And then there's many times whenever you'll see the word provoked or moved used in the King James, specifically in 2 Samuel 24, verse 1, 1 Chronicles 21, verse 1, Ezra 4:15, and Zechariah 8, verse 14, where it says provoked and moved. Those are the two words that are used in those verses. But in the MEV, it says incited. I-N-C-I-T-E-D, incited. I don't know about you, but provoked and moved, like he moved David to do this thing, or he moved David to do that, or he provoked this person to do this. That's a lot more easy to understand than incited. And then I have a bunch of references listed here, but like Genesis, actually, I would recommend someone go onto a website like the Bible Gateway and open up the Authorized King James Bible, and they search the word south, okay? Or not necessarily, okay. I'm in the King James, it says south in these verses, but in the MEV it says Negev, Negev. Okay, so go into Bible Gateway, open up the MEV, and type in Negev. Okay, so Negev. Search that word and then go through and copy every reference and look at them in the King James. When you look at them, you'll see that the King James uses south. So you're talking about they're going down to the south, or they're going southward, or they're going this way, or they're going south, right? They're going south. It's like, what does that even mean? It's like a Hebrew word that they didn't even translate. It means south. And that's supposed to be easier than south. And that to me doesn't make any sense. Like, why is it that they think that it's easier to understand a Hebrew word than it is to understand south? And yet this is supposed to be a contemporary, easy to understand translation, but it replaces an easy word with a Hebrew word that's not easier. In Deuteronomy 32, verse 11, it changes the word wings in the King James to pinons, P-I-N-I-O-N-S. And so that's just a few. You could go through and you could look at more. And there's just so many of them. I actually skipped over a few of them, I think, but there are hard words in modern Bibles too. So Mark Ward is attacking the King James because it has hard words, but he's not even looking at the modern Bibles and their hard words. Nor, whenever I had literally brought it up in our argument, or not necessarily argument, but in our discussion, I brought it up that the modern Bibles do have hard words still, and he didn't take time to address it in his video. Now, whether he didn't have time or not, I don't know. But I think that not addressing that was an error on his part, at least. Um, and so I do think that, Mark Ward, if you see this video, please try and address this. How are there still hard words in modern Bibles, and how does that apply to the King James? Because if the King James has hard words, but modern Bibles do too, then it's kind of a double standard to hold the King James to a standard and say, well, it's unintelligible because it has hard words in it, but not hold modern Bibles to that same standard whenever they also have hard words. And as for that word besom that Mark Ward likes to bring up, it's only used in the King James once. Only once. And yet, I've seen it. I've watched many of his videos, and I've seen it multiple times where he brings up the same word, besom, besom, besom. But guess what? It's only used once. And plus, we don't use besom in our everyday vernacular. So whenever you see that word, just go grab a Webster's 1828 dictionary and look it up. It's a word that you don't know, so it's not even a false friend even. And so you don't know this word, look it up. It's like whenever you see a word in modern Bible that you don't know, and you just look it up in a dictionary. It's the same idea. And so just because someone says that the King James is hard to read doesn't mean that it is, or that modern Bibles are always easier. Because that's just part of the Bible, is that there are things in the Bible that are hard. And so in this video, I hope I showed at least some hard places in modern Bibles, even TR-based ones, where there are hard words. So surely Mark Ward wouldn't claim that these Bibles are hard to read. So why should he say the King James is hard to read? Sean, do you have any comments?
Wow, that was very insightful indeed, very deep. And, just like Kenyon, you mentioned, I have never heard any of those words before. I have not heard that used in common languages, common language, common dialogue. And so realistically, to even consider this to be used in place of simpler words found in the King James, I find it very, very confusing that even the translators would consider doing this.
Right. It seems
But
like a double standard.
indeed, it does seem like a double standard. But Kenyon, a quick question for you is this in regards to what I was saying earlier in terms of unintelligibility and all of that analogy and such. A question that I have for you is this: I wanted to see if you'd agree with me on this statement or not. But based on the especially when you went over several of these words, something that I believe should be also addressed is the fact that words such as right now in the King James, we have thee, thou, and all of that such, which are typically pronouns, which are not too hard. But would you
Right.
suggest, because you mentioned in your comments with Mark Ward that essentially that the words, it has to be very unintelligible before you would even suggest that an update would even take place for the King James. But realistically, wouldn't those words have to be doctrinal words, words that are crucial to the understanding of what salvation is, what resurrection, what the blood atonement is all about? Those kinds of words have to become hard and not just pronouns or other simple nouns.
Yeah, I do think that because in school they always have you read people like Shakespeare and others that used the second person pronouns like thee and thou and ye and you. They used those pronouns like that. Maybe not in the same exact way the King James did, but they did use those words. And I don't see anybody around like being like, "Oh, we gotta update Shakespeare." I haven't, I mean, surely there's probably somebody, but I've never heard it, and nobody really seems to call for that. But, and so if you want to learn the King James, I mean, even if you're just starting out with the King James, just think of thee and thou and ye and you as just you. Just think about it like that. Like, obviously, there are differences, and it is definitely once you start reading the King James more and more that you should be told the differences between thee and thou, how those are singular, and how ye and you and your and all those are plural. You should be told that. But it's as a basic understanding, if you read it as you, it's pretty easy to understand those sort of words. And as you were saying, like if doctrinal words aren't changed, like we're not losing the word atonement, we're not losing words like that, then there's no real reason, in my opinion, that we would need to update it. Because if everyone can still read John 3:16 and understand it, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life, unless that becomes unintelligible, then I don't think we really need an update. Not that I'm necessarily against one, because it is a translation, but I do not think we need one, especially at this current moment.
Exactly, exactly. Thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure we set the record straight from our side. Exactly when, in terms, what do we mean by words being unintelligible? What words specifically? And again, for those of you watching at home, we want to reassure you we are not calling for a 21st century like King James. We actually have a docuseries coming out, Truth Prevaileth Season 1, airing May 17th. Episode 1, May 17th through August 23rd, 2024, which will go over the entire history of the King James Bible, the history before the King James, the translations that existed before, the people involved in making the Greek text and all of that, Jerome's Latin Vulgate and all that, how the development of the King James and the people behind it, and the conspirators and the Roman Catholic Church that was involved in creating the base corrupt manuscript, which is used for the development of many of the false translations and mistranslations that we have in the English language today. The purpose of this video, again, Mark Ward, we hope you watch this video, and we want to know we are not trying to attack you. We appreciate that the video you made was very civil in tone, and we wanted to respond with civilness in our tone as well, just to clear out the air, and we wanted to really question the narrative that is being portrayed here. That is what our main goal here at Cross Crusaders is to question the narrative being portrayed by mainstream Christianity. So we hope that this is a blessing to all. May God bless you, and we hope that the truth opens your eyes. And remember, folks, truth prevaileth. Kenny, would you like anything to add to that?
Yep, truth prevaileth.
Amen. God bless you all. We'll see you later.